You don't have to be the smartest person or the most skilled person in any job, in any company. Because guess what? One, there's probably someone who's more skilled than you. And two, like nobody wants to work with an asshole, right?
Only real content is gonna last. All that other nonsense is here today and gone tomorrow.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Navigating Now. It is your host, Des Cole. And today, our guest is quite a special one. He is he is a internal communications manager at Spotify. He is also an alumni of our school, Manhattan College. And he's also just a really, really cool guy. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome TK Bruer to Navigating Now. TK, how you doing, man?
Thanks so much. Go Jaspers, Jasper Nation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's right. I did go to Manhattan College, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with the both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So TK, the first question I wanted to get into is just, I wanted to ask, how old are you? And can you just give a little bit of your background?
Sure. So I'm 28. I grew up in the tri-state area, small town called Brookfield, Connecticut, which is about more or less like an hour and a half away from the city. And grew up listening to a lot of music, primarily like punk, and then like, everything else sprinkled in between, and wanted to live in New York like my entire life, and because it was so close. And I probably wasn't the most academic person in the world. Got lucky that I got into Manhattan College, and that was really it. That was the catalyst to where I am today. And I mean that in the sense that the school was in the city, and I could go see shows, but also build up a professional network here and make friends that I still keep in touch with for today. So yeah, that's like the incredibly abridged version. And now I live in Manhattan right now. So I'm trying to think. It's been 10 years because I graduated in 2010 from Manhattan College, or 2014. Sorry, I started in 2010. So that's been like a solid 10 years of living in New York, more or less. I didn't really go home on the breaks, so I stayed on campus in between. And yeah, now it's 2020, and a different year for sure, but nonetheless, still doing a lot of the same things that I would be doing if the world was still normal. I'm still releasing music, still keeping in touch with my friends, and New York is not dead. There's still a lot of cool things happening in the city despite what's going on in New York and the world.
Absolutely.
It's not dead at all.
Yeah.
I was just telling that to my brother this morning, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's this like, I think that the media kind of works it up to say as if like it's a ghost town, and like there's not a lot to do. But I mean, honestly, like, I was out like 2 weeks ago, out to dinner with my girlfriend and a friend who's a graphic designer at Bloomberg, the media company, and we saw the restaurants were packed, but
Full.
in a way that people, but it was like people were safe. They all had masks on, and there were people playing music. So New York is, it's a different time for sure, but like I think like when there are challenges in the world, like after 9/11, you saw New York kind of rally. I was only like 10 or 11, and so I don't really remember that, but I know people who were here who I worked with and said it kind of feels like that. It's kind of a little bit more prolonged because we're still in a pandemic, but yeah, New York is not dead.
Not at all.
Facts. So since your time in college at Manhattan, you've gotten a chance to kind of work for an intern at some pretty cool companies. So I wanted to ask, can you speak on some benefits and shortcomings of working for some of these really large corporations?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So when I was a junior in 2012 or 13, I believe, I kind of obsessed over like needing to have some type of internship. And so I applied to like a ton of places, and I came close to, in fact, I accepted one that was for a small newspaper in New York. And after the fact that I was considering accepting this one, didn't officially, and I ended up applying to Vice Media. So at the time, it was a much smaller company. It didn't have a stake with Disney. It was like they had like all these crazy documentaries where they would sneak people into North Korea, and like people would do like like I don't know, they would do documentaries about like DMT or something, like that's taboo culture, just like not the norm. And it was also like it was founded in Canada, so like had like back in the day it had like a big like skateboarding element to it, and a music element. So I applied to this place, and I kind of obsessed with like wanting to work there. And what happened was I like interviewed during my winter break on the spot, and like the next day they offered me like an internal communications, or rather a communications internship, which by the way so happened to be me doing internal communications. It's crazy how everything kind of loops back. I was sending out press reports of all of the coverage that Vice was working on at the time, and it was a really, really fun thing to be a part of. I remember I was there for the season 1 launch of Vice on HBO. I don't think it's on HBO anymore. I think it's on a different network. It might be Showtime, if I'm not mistaken. And this was before they had like Vice News. So like that wasn't even a channel. That was like they were talking about like we're going to be big, like we're going to have a news channel. We're gonna get Vice Sports is huge. That was before that was even there. There was Noisy. Like I remember like running into the editor. I mean, I was only an intern, so they probably don't remember me, but I would go in every day, and like the big thing was sending out like a weekly report. And funny enough, I do that for Spotify today, and that's just like one small fraction of my current scope of work, but it was cool. And the parties were awesome. And I was at a brand that was about to explode. And in the terms of like recognition, and now it's way bigger. And so I left, and then I ended up working for Bloomberg, and after college, and then was there for 5 years. And then I've been at Spotify for like about a year. I think I like accepted the offer like this week of last year. So it's been basically a full year. Awesome company. But I want to bring it back to your initial question, which is what's the benefit of working for the pros and the cons of working for a big and a small company. I think that and please, if that's what your initial question was, right? That's what you're looking for. Yeah. So like I think like working for a big company is awesome. So if you're working, so it's awesome in the sense that you kind of know what like your job is, right? So like at Bloomberg, which is a company that's 20,000 employees, much larger, more than double the size of what Spotify is. Spotify is about like 6,000. And all of this, well, for Spotify, it's public, so you could look it up in the earnings report that came out today. They disclose all that information. But the difference is, right, like at Bloomberg, like you really know what your job is. So like it's very clear cut, like this person does that, this person does this. And oftentimes, that company acts like a startup because there's so many different business verticals where you can get that startup feel. And it's a lot of fun. And I think that, when you're trying to figure out what you want to do earlier in your career, I think it's the benefit to a large company is that it's very tailored. Like you will have a certain set, like maybe curriculum is the wrong word, but like direction of like what you want to do when you're in a certain job. And when you're like entry level, you can like navigate that because your job isn't that like high of a risk yet, where like if you do something wrong, like it's probably not going to cost you your job. But if you're like higher up the food ladder, you know, like you can do something and like royally mess up. So I think like the benefit of like a big company like a Bloomberg, Spotify too, you know, is that you can really carve out your path. Spotify is a little bit different in the sense that, you know, Bloomberg is a private company, so it's not publicly traded. Spotify is a public company where we are publicly traded. And we have to, you know, the way we report how the company works is different. We have quarterly earnings, whereas Bloomberg is a private company and they don't need to disclose any of that information because the former mayor, Michael Bloomberg, owns that company. So the way that they operate is a little bit different, and Spotify is a little bit smaller. I mean, 6,000 employees is a lot, but it's still much more of a, I think it's a little bit more startup-y, especially in the PR, like internal comms world, because like Spotify is like a youth, like it's a brand, like it's you know, it's a household name. Bloomberg is for the financial industry. Like if you're on Wall Street, you definitely know what the Bloomberg terminal is. If you're a business student, you probably know what the Bloomberg terminal is because it's baked into college curriculums. So I think like the cons for working at big companies could be that you know, there's a level of entrepreneurship with these jobs, but like you aren't going to be able to, you know, go sell your product. So like me in communications at Bloomberg or Spotify or even at Vice, like at Vice, I'm not going to be selling their magazines if that's still even a thing anymore. I'm not going to be selling the Bloomberg terminal, and I'm not going to be selling you know, Spotify premium subscriptions. My job is to help sell that by communicating and like arming the sales team, or if I'm in an external communications, if I'm pitching a story, I want to position Spotify or Bloomberg or Vice in the best way possible. So I think that like if you're at a smaller company, like a startup, say something that's like, you know, 50 to 100 people, like it's all pros and cons, because if that company takes off, right, and they IPO, for Spotify, for example, right, like there were employees here who I work with, who I've met, who have been here since day one. And they remember when the office was, you would talk to Daniel Ek, who's the CEO, and he would come up to you and have a conversation. That doesn't happen when you're in a large organization, you know, when you reach a certain level. And also too, if you're thinking about like money and like, you know, personal finance, like you oftentimes when you work for a smaller startup, you might get some equity package where like, if you go public, like you can cash out big time. So I think that there's pros and cons on those two sides, like having a startup and then working for a big company. And, you know, if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to start your own small business, you have to, I think it's definitely way more work, because like you don't have anything to validate your credibility, and you need to be constantly like, you are the salesperson, you are the marketing person, you're the CFO, like you're managing your balance sheet. And you know, your partnerships with other businesses. So I think that, you know, all of that is still very much doable, you know, with the internet and all. But like, I think there's pros and cons, and I think that every person is different. You know, there's also the agency world. You know, if you're like into marketing or communications, you know, like I work with a lot of agencies. Spotify has a ton of agencies. Bloomberg, all major companies work with agencies. And the great thing about an agency, right, is that if you're looking into that, it's more established. So like you could go in and be like an account coordinator or assistant account executive, rather. I think that's like the entry level role. And the beauty about that is kind of like going back to college, in the sense that a lot of agencies, like if you're in that type of role, there's relatively people in their early 20s, and you can kind of get that liberal arts-esque education where you're getting a little piece of every little brand, and then or industry, right? So like you could be working on Tide, you could be working on Ford, and you could be working on Twitter. Those are your accounts. Those are different industries, different ways, and maybe a bank, right? And like those are all different industries, and so you can like learn like what you really like. And a lot of times people in the agency world, they build up that experience and then they finally, they switch with what the industry would call in-house. So they'll go in-house to a major company like that Tide or the bank or a Twitter. So that's a very long answer of all the possibilities of corporate America.
I kind of wanted to loop back around to, because I know that you've done communications now for media company, music brand, and politics, basically, Bloomberg.
Yeah, sure.
So one I wanted to ask, was communications what you studied, and like, was that always what you wanted to do?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, first of all.
So as I said before, I didn't really care too much about school when I was in high school. Like, I just wanted to play music. I lived and breathed music. And then it got to the point of your parents being like, oh, like you need to go to college or else like you're not gonna like be successful, which it sounds very cliche and there's a lot of people who will say it, but it is true. Like you don't need to go to college to do a lot of what I'm doing. I think it's a huge advantage, but it's not necessarily like the one size fits all thing. So college isn't right for everybody, but I was lucky enough where I interned at like going into college at a medical lab, and I think it was at Yale University. And I was kind of fascinated with like that work, but it was very much so like people telling me that like, this is what you want to do. Here's what you want to do. And so I was a pre-med, like I got accepted into Manhattan College as a pre-med student. And as I got closer, like that summer going into Manhattan College, like that awkward, year where you're like, oh fuck, like I'm going to college now. What's this gonna be like? I changed over to communications, and I'm someone who like likes to read the news, and so like I like every morning, like I'm reading Bloomberg, I'm reading Wall Street Journal, I'm reading the New York Times. I have subscriptions to all of that through work, some I pay for. So I went to school for that, I think, and then also like I was an English minor, so like writing and like that creative expression was something that I've always been chasing, and like I'm very lucky that like I followed through with that. I honestly don't think there are times where like I'm like, oh, I could have been like a salesperson and like sell this, but like this product, and like I've had people tell me that, and then like some people being like HR, like recruiting, and like honestly, like that's not for me. Like I think sales is awesome, but like I enjoy like the beauty of communications or marketing is that like your job is creative and you're still working for a corporation, and like there are boundaries where your creativity can hit a wall, but like like no, like I'm very like lucky, and like I don't really know, there's like a very a small handful of people that I know that like stuck with communications and they're still doing it. So yeah, I like it.
So a follow-up to that, just having to or being able to do communications at different scopes.
Yeah.
What have you learned to be the most important strategies for internal communications?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I think the short answer is mapping out what you want to say. I mean, this sounds so straightforward, but it's a little bit more complex than that. Like if you have a major announcement, you want to make sure that all of the right people are reading it. So if you are doing internal communications for a major company and there's there's like a major product announcement, you want to inform all of the right people at the right time. You want to have metrics. What I mean by that is analytics. So like I think of it twofold, right? Like there's like the process of a communication is, say Spotify or say Bloomberg or Google is like announcing some type of product. You want to be looped in on that conversation and create some type of plan where you can say, what is the most important audience that needs to know that this is coming out? And it's the product team, it's the sales team, it's the people who are like directly involved with the process. And then you want to map out how, like, different phases of how you're going to communicate that. So if the product is ready, then you post it somewhere internally. Then you think about, okay, well, there's only a certain amount of people are going to be reading this. How do I blow it up? Maybe it's a newsletter. Maybe it's a all company-wide town hall, company meeting where all of the employees tune in. And then what are you going to do after that? Like, what's the cadence? So like after you communicate that, like, is there a phase 2 of that product launch? Or are you going to stop there? And if you're going to stop there, how are you going to prove your value back to your stakeholders? And that's the people you work with. So how do you say, okay, we did this, here's how it landed? And I think it's twofold. There's your hard metrics, which are like the, 120 people out of 150 people read your announcement. Here's what the stories they clicked on in your article. That's like the hard metrics. Those are kind of easier to capture. And then you have your soft metrics, which are more qualitative. And what I mean by that is like, what was the sentiment? Like, did people like that we announced this product? How do people feel about it? Like, were people having conversations about it after they exited their town hall where you spoke about this? Did you have like some type of survey where you got feedback, and that's like the qualitative feedback that you can then create some type of email or some type of document, and report that back to the person who owns that product. And that proves your value, and you get more buy-in from the people that you're working with. So yeah, that's like kind of how communications for internal communications works. A lot of companies, they think of it as like when you're in college, you have a thesis statement, right? Like teams have thesis statements, and they call that like, like it's your business objective. That's what they'll call it in the business world. So like most companies for internal comms, it'll be like to inspire, to inform, and to enable your employees, because your employees at your company are your number one asset, because they're the ones who are making everything happen. So if you can inform them about what's relevant, if you can inspire them to be creative with their work, to go above and beyond and educate them, then like you're winning.
Sure, absolutely. So my next question kind of takes a transition, but it's like,
sure,
I think you have a really unique perspective just because you work at Spotify. So I wanted to ask, where do you think the future of music and audio distribution as a whole is headed right now?
Sure. So I can't technically speak on Spotify's behalf, but I can say from my perspective, like, I think that I think that there's only going to be more and more music and podcasts being released. I think that COVID-19, for not just for Spotify, but for like podcasting industry in general, is getting like that, that third wave of content, right? Because like podcasting started like in the early 2005, 2004, I want to say. And by the way, podcasting comes from Apple. So Apple coined podcast, and then it kind of like there was this first wave, and like it was big, and you could download it on the iTunes store, and then it came back. And like Joe Rogan, is like one of, he's kind of like the guy's Oprah. That's how I think of Joe Rogan, or like a Martha Stewart.
That's funny.
He's like he tries to be like this neutral guy, and then he has controversial guests on, and oftentimes he's critiqued for it, sometimes rightfully so. And so it's I think that there's only going to be more of it. I think that the way people consume will change. I think that whether that means like you're in a car and that experience is different. I think that I don't see it going anywhere. I think like as an artist, I can speak on behalf of an artist because like I have music on Spotify, all of the streaming services. I think that the way that they compensate artists will change eventually.
Yeah,
You
that was gonna be like my follow up,
Yeah.
just about how, just because even we have
know, so
friends that we have met that make music, and they put their music on DistroKid,
yeah,
and just like how, and even massive artists like Jay-Z, Kanye, all talking about wanting to get their masters, and kind of that fight against
right.
the music industry, and how that's kind of transitioning. It's just kind of
Well,
interesting to see how those major labels are going to be able to transition like that.
yeah, I mean the labels have a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
And they you know, when you think about like what's going behind the scenes with every streaming company, um, the labels are like it's their talent. So they are the ones who are controlling a lot of like what's happening, what you see and what you read. You know, streaming rates, like that's brokered between the streaming providers, and that I think that there is a problem. I think that Spotify is aware of that. I think that other companies are aware of that. Um, but I think that if you know, it's not, you know, if you were to take that out of if you were to just cut what I just said there, that wouldn't tell the whole story. It's more nuanced,
Mm-hmm.
because without Spotify, or without without Apple Music, without Amazon, without all of these platforms, even SoundCloud, you know, even Tidal, I'll throw
Mm-hmm.
them in the mix. You know, they're like artists are being able to create more content, to send it out into the world more than ever. I think that the industry has changed. I think that, you know, again, this is me speaking as an artist. You know, it's like, yeah, like physical CDs are dead, and that died. And you know, pirating, like before there was a Spotify or any of that, there was a thing called Kazaa and like Rhapsody and like all of these other programs that were out there before Spotify. Some of them were illegal, and Spotify came in and other streaming providers, and they corrected an issue by making it actually like it's not high margin, like where like you're, you know, walking out with like big money in your pockets. For some artists, that's actually not true. There's a lot of artists who are getting paid a lot of money through Spotify. You know, Spotify and other companies pay out billions of dollars, and during COVID, like there's been a lot of artists that have been getting paid a lot of money for that. I think that it's one of those things where if you're thinking of Spotify or Apple Music being your only form of income, like your only like way to market yourself as an artist, you're probably thinking about it in the wrong way, right? Like it's one of those
Mm-hmm.
things where they say don't put all of your eggs in one basket when you're investing, right? And I think people kind of think, well, you know, well, Spotify or Apple is like the only way, you know, as a musician, as a songwriter, as a guitar player, as a rapper, as a pianist, like that's the only way I'm going to make money. It's like, no, like I don't, you know, I work for Spotify. I would not put all of my music only on Spotify. Like I'm putting it on Apple Music. They're a competitor. I'm putting it on as
Mm-hmm.
many places as I can because I'm thinking about myself as a business. So like Bandcamp, SoundCloud, like YouTube, like you have to diversify where you're putting your
Right.
content out. And also if you're thinking of like streaming being the only way to make money as an artist now, I think that's unfortunately it's not the right way to move forward. I think you need to think about merch. I think you need to think about like shows. I think you need to think about, yeah, like there's other ways to make money. Now that's not to say that there's a problem. Like I think that there's a problem. I don't have the answer for that. I think that a lot of the companies are aware of that and they're trying to figure it out. And they're working on it. And there has been a lot of progress made. Like I said before, there's been billions of dollars paid out to artists. There's more artists now than ever that are discoverable. But me speaking as a musician, not as a Spotify employee, I I think that they're more beneficial, because look, if Spotify goes away or Apple goes away, there's going to be something else, right? Like there was already
Mm-hmm.
something else before Spotify. In fact, piracy, even before the internet, that still existed. There was a second market for that. There was a black market. So you need to like think about it strategically. What can you work with what you have now that makes sense for you? So
Yeah, and I want to kind of to follow up on talking about how there's so much kind of competition, but they're all with these really big companies, Apple Music, Spotify,
Mhm.
Amazon. And I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the monopolies that are kind of evolving in tech. And something
Whew,
that
it's a great
I
question.
noticed, yeah, something that
Yeah.
I noticed recently was like why haven't we broken them up? And I think
Yeah.
the most difficult thing to distribute with them is the data, because them being tech and
Yeah, man.
online makes like creates a whole nother variable with trying to disassemble the whole ship. So like if you want to just talk on that a little bit.
So for sure. So again, this is coming from me and I was a Spotify employee. I think that the tech companies are incredibly powerful. I think that the world, in particular, the government, the US government, even like the EU, they underestimated the power that like a Google or a Facebook or like a major corporation had. And now we've hit this point where politically, like with the 2016 election, we were kind of blindsided with what happened with like the Cambridge Analytica stuff. And like, I think like there definitely is a monopoly, and yeah, I think that this is going to be an ongoing problem. I think that like the biggest thing, the key problem is trust, consumer trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like we know that Facebook, major companies are collecting data and we don't know where that information is going, and there's like a privacy issue. I also think that there's a lack of, like, the biggest problem I'm seeing right now, like with the election, is that there's a lot of like older people who are using Facebook and they don't understand. There's a great documentary, I think, called like The Social Dilemma or something like that. It's on Netflix right now. I haven't
Yeah.
seen it, but I've heard about it, where people don't realize that there are algorithms that are controlling the content that they're seeing. And I think our generation, like you guys, like people who are my age, like we know that already. But there are older people out there who see something on Facebook, who think that like that buy into like conspiracies, and social media platforms like Twitter, Spotify, not so much. I mean, there are podcasts where we have like there are people out there who can say whatever they want. For example, like Alex Jones was like on Rogan like yesterday for 3 hours, going off, getting drunk, and just being crazy. It was freaking insane. But you got to realize like that, but it doesn't really happen as much on Spotify or like other, like I think like it's more like the target right now is like really like from, again, my personal opinion, not Spotify's. I'm seeing it at like Facebook and like Twitter, and like they're starting to ban things. And I think it's going back to that. There's a lack of education. I think that older generations, or people, I'm not going to just bucket an older generation. I think it's also people who just might not be educate themselves enough about how all this works and just read everything they see and they take at face value, and it creates divide. So like if you have one political message, you're only going to stay in your own orbit, right? And like you're going to read things that make you feel comfortable, So I think that this problem, it's not going to go away. I don't think it's going to go away if the current president wins next on Tuesday, which is hard to believe that's coming up. If the other candidate wins too, it's definitely not going to go away.
Right.
I think that there's going to be a breaking point, but they are a private business, and all of these companies are private. I mean, they're publicly traded, but like they do things that are within their own world. And like, I think that, I think there's a huge issue. I think it's trust.
Yeah. I think something important that you touched on there is just the I'm going to kind of bring it back to what you said, even just about artists and diversifying where you put out your music. Sure. As a consumer, if you have that awareness that if you only follow certain things, then you're just going to be an echo chamber of information. And so you should diversify where you get your content and the people that you follow, and get both sides. I think that is just something I'd encourage everybody to do, because
Well,
you will fall victim to that if you just take it, like you said, at face value.
yeah. Well, you're nailing it right there. And I think that, like, sure, but if you're only sticking to one service, right? So like, say like you only like Bandcamp, that's fine,
Mhm.
but just understand the business model. Like, that doesn't mean like I got to pay for Apple, Spotify, Amazon.
Right.
No, it's like you get your music, but then like, what are you giving back to that artist? Like, are you buying their record? Like, or if you really care about like the local art that's out there, like buy some of it, like buy physical copies of it. And that's something that Spotify and like other companies are creating online stores like merch. Like that's
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure.
You know what would be crazy? I just had an idea real quick. Imagine if Spotify created a marketplace like how Instagram did.
Well,
artists.
that's yeah, that's actually that's literally what Spotify's doing right now. That's like in their So I can't, again, I can't really speak on behalf of it. Some of this is already public. Like, they're creating tools for artists
Right.
to
No, that's
promote their
dope.
work. You know, there's push notifications. They've partnered with
Mhm.
stores where you can, you know, have like a merch bar.
Right.
I think it's
Yeah, I mean,
merchbar.com.
one of my favorite things before about Spotify, because I've had Spotify since like middle school,
Yeah.
is that like you could buy I think it was some before, but like it showed like their tour dates. It showed if they were
Yeah.
gonna be in your city.
That's a
It
marketplace.
gave like, yeah, like
So
all
that's
of
part
that.
of
I
the
thought that was
strategy. So it's two-sided, right? Like, Spotify's goal is to make a world where, you know, like 1 billion creators are living off an equitable salary income. And it's heading in that direction. I mean, like, there was record payouts. Again, this is all coming off of like earnings and like the past information that we know this year that's public. Like, that's happening. It's getting there, but there are things that need to be fixed, and you know, they're like, they're working on it. And I think that when I personally see campaigns, like, you know, when I see artists upset about all of, like, you know, streaming rates and all that, like, I get it. Like, you know, like, I personally speaking, like, it's not enough. But you have to think and realize that it's more nuanced than that. Like, it's not just the streaming providers. There's also the record companies. And by the way, like, they have a huge seat at the table, and they did back in like the 60s and 70s, when you're thinking about like the birth of rock and roll. You know, like, that hasn't changed. Like, they're still a major player in the music industry. They're like the rock that's holding everything together.
right.
So
Yeah, so we're running pretty long
We're
on
good
time,
on
but
time.
I'm not
Right.
I'm
We're
not
good
mad
on
at
time. It's
about
alright.
it at all.
yeah, I know.
I still wanted to get the last question that we asked everybody at the end.
I have one more before we go to
Yeah, one more.
Sure.
yeah,
Sure, it's
I
fine.
wanted to ask, how do you think music plays a role in culture as a whole? Because to us, like, culture is like that kind of lifeblood of society. Culture is the legacy of a
It's
society.
it's for me personally, and I'm incredibly biased because I'm a musician, and this is what, like, again, like, I'm very, very, very lucky. I think we said this before a couple months ago when we were talking about how, like, it's like when you're trying to find your job, like, it's like there's a level of luck, there's mostly skill, but there's also luck, who you know, and cultural fit. And like, I'm lucky enough to work for a company that like is the #1 streaming provider, like, you know, like, out there for music, and in my opinion. And I think it's incredibly important. I think it heals. I think you know, it's going to be really interesting to see the Wrapped campaign that Spotify will be launching at the end of the year, where you see like what the top artists were. So like, our teams are, you know, we're at my work job. I have to be careful, you know, like, it's that's where we're starting to build that out. And I think like you're going to see a lot of things that reflect what happened this year. And like, there's a lot of trends, and I think people turn to music in all stages of life. Like, when you think about when you have, you know, like a kid, when you're younger, and like your kid like learns like sing along songs, and then, you know, that kid develops and they're into, like, you know, at my age, it was like the Backstreet Boys, and they used to have this thing called Now That's What I Call Music, which I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yes.
Yeah, you do. Okay, cool. So
They
like,
had
I'm not
all
that
the
old.
different series.
Yeah, like Now That's
Oh
What I
yeah.
Call Music 20. Like, yeah.
22,
I
20.
can't.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For me
Like,
personally, I was probably like in the 3rd grade, and I got Now That's What I Call Music 3. which
Mhm.
I remember like when the first ones came out, and like I saw like there was some stuff on there. I think it was like Blink 182, and
Mhm.
like I was like, hell yeah, like this is so cool, and that like incubated like the music I listen to today. And like I still listen to like a lot of like that similar but like smaller artists. And you think about monumental, like like I always equate like where I was like to like a certain album. So like my junior year of high school, um or senior year, I think, was Kid Cudi, Man on the Moon. Like I equate memories to records, and
Right.
like when I hear a song, it brings me back. So for me personally, like, yeah, but it's culture carriers, right? Like, again, if you think about America, like Bruce Springsteen wrote a record after 9/11 happened.
Mhm.
There's going to be music that's coming out of COVID. um I personally release stuff without being stuck in my apartment, and like,
Right.
like nothing else to do, might as well like write music and like put it out there into the world. So
Right.
yeah, I think most people in the world, if you were to do a poll, I would say, if it was a yes or no, do you like music? Most people
Right.
would say yes, right? Like,
Right.
so it's not going anywhere. And it doesn't matter what company you work for. You're going to the bank, you hear like your drum music and money from an ATM. You're hearing the top 40, or like, even if you're working at the bank, like the JP Morgan downtown or Midtown Manhattan, they probably have somebody's playing music, right? Like,
Right.
it's everywhere.
No,
It's
for sure.
incredibly
No,
important. Every
I really
genre.
liked. I really liked how you talked about how you. I think everybody does it. They have albums for like certain moments of their life.
Yeah.
For some reason, I just want to ask: is it the same thing in your generation? Because everybody seems to think Summer 16 was like the best. What
Summer
is it about
16
Summer
fucking
16
ruled.
that was so great? I know it
Summer
was Drake.
2016 was
It
awesome.
was it
Yeah.
was great though, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like for me, actually, like because like so yeah, like I don't like it depends on what genre. Like for me, like, I mean, you just mentioned Drake, so like hip hop, like
Hmm.
sure, that was great. Oddly 2000, I mean, I don't really like Kanye, but like I like My
Right.
Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, like if you're talking about hip hop, like that was one of probably like top 15 records for me of all time. Like could make it for like best hip hop. And then it's funny, like I was going to bed the other night, and I someone, so you I don't know if you heard Machine Gun Kelly,
Hmm.
his new record where he like switched to pop punk. It sounds like a
I
Blink
haven't
182
heard.
record. Yeah,
Really?
it's not rap. Yeah, it's crazy. I was reading more about him because I knew about him, but I knew about him with his beef with Eminem. And so
Yeah.
yeah, and it's so funny. Like I was listening to Eminem, and I was like, oh man, like I remember like when the Marshall Mathers EP came out, and when Eminem was like the king of rap. And
Hmm.
then like, yeah, and then Kanye, and then Drake. And yeah, for me personally, I think like the best year of music was like 2011, 2010, 2009. Like for indie, for
Mm.
like indie rock. Like if you go like on like Pitchfork and you read, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Pitchfork, but if you go on like their best music of they do like every year they'll do like best record, best
Hmm.
albums, some really great stuff that came out then. I actually think that there's been a lot of great music this year. Um,
I think
so
there's
it's been
been a lot.
killer, and I think that more of it's going to be, you're going to start to see more of like the COVID stuff. Like I
Hmm.
think when there's, as an artist, like as a musician, like there's always, when there's dark times, like
Right.
creativity sparks. And
Yep.
that's what I'm saying about New York, man. Like there's still a lot of things that are happening
Hmm.
here. It's not dead.
Oh yeah. All right. So this was the final question that we asked everybody.
Sure. Well, I
And
think,
even
did you have
though,
another one or no? Did No?
No, you're
oh
good.
Jay.
Yeah. Did Jay, do you have another or no?
That's all good. We'll get into the last one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. All right. So yeah. So the final question we asked everybody is, what is the most important skill that you've learned and applied so far? I'd say in your life.
Being a good person. I mean, that's such like a generalization, but I think like in a job, at school, in a band, like, as a brother, or, as a son, or whatever, like your role is in life. Like, I think if you're being authentic, who you are, and you're not going out of your way to go behind someone's back, or like you might not understand something completely. Like when you start your first job, you're not going to know a lot. But as long as you're smiling and you have like a good attitude, and like there's going to be incredibly stressful periods in a career or your life. I mean, now like everybody's stressed, like anxiety, depression's up during COVID. Like reaching out to people and reminding them that they're all human, like, you know, like that's like beneficial. Calling people, checking in with them, not burning bridges with people, like keeping the lights on. You know, if it's something political and they don't agree with you on it, like, you know, rather than, you know, screaming at them and deleting them from like a Facebook or something, like, no, like it's like keep the light on and try and voice your opinion without, you know, seeming mean. And like I think like I really wish there was more of that like today. But I think like you'll be successful. You don't have to be the smartest person or the most skilled person in any job, in any company. Because guess what? One, there's probably someone who's more skilled than you. And two, like nobody wants to work with an asshole, right? Like you know, like you could be like the, you know, an Ernest Hemingway, and you know, have a publishing company and have a Pulitzer Prize, and then you work in like advertising and your writing is superb, but you're like people don't like you, like, and you know, like, and you're not gonna do your best work if you're trying to work with someone who's not that fun to be around.
Right.
So
no, you're like I think, what are we, 6 for 6 on that one?
yeah, man. Well, look, it's a pleasure. I'm happy to, you know, continue talking with you both. You're very good people, and
Thank you.
yeah, when the world is normal, you know, again, as I said before, but we'll have to grab beers and just like be normal people hanging out rather than hidden behind computer screens.
Right.
Yeah, hopefully
for sure.
that's sooner than later. But
yeah, I'd love to, maybe we can interview you as TK the artist.
yeah,
I think that'd be really
Yeah.
cool, because I mean, I just personally have like 3 friends who are all trying to make it in music, and
yeah,
they all record out of their rooms and stuff like that. So
yeah.
I just think you're
Oh, thanks.
yeah, I know you're
We're the-
talking about it a little earlier.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the right
Yeah.
location. I mean, look, if you're in New York, you're still like there's still music here. Like it's gonna come
Right.
back. Like it's always been this way. There's been hard times, you know.
Mhm.
Like it's not the first pandemic for New York. Like everybody likes to talk about how like, you know, like, oh my God, it's never been this bad, and like it's all about perspective, man. Like
Right.
1918. I mean, I love to read history, and like you know, like I like sometimes will read like biographies of like, you know, people like World War One, like World War Two. Like I'm reading like a Churchill biography that I've been working on for almost a year now. It's hopefully gonna be done with it soon. But like there were times where it was tough in New York. Like there was a pandemic. In fact, it was way worse. And there was still music that was happening then. It's just not how we think about it today. So we'll get through this. And yeah, and if you're a musician, like keep going, you know, like don't stop, keep creating.
All right, yeah. Well, thank you very much, TK, for having on. I'm sure this will, or for being on here. I'm sure this won't be our last conversation, as you said before.
Oh, well, that's right.
But just before we go, if you'd just like to shout out yourself, your handles, where anybody could find you.
Yeah, sure. I'm on Twitter at TK Tweetit, I believe is my handle. I'm also on Instagram. I think it's tbrewer7735. I'll actually be sharing on my my Instagram later. I recorded last weekend with so I said before I released that EP, I had a buddy who's like a really excellent filmmaker. His name is Zach Cooper. He does like freelance work for Sony. But we went into a studio and recorded 2 songs from the EP that I put out earlier this month, and actually aired it internally today for Spotify, which was really cool. For like a Halloween concert, Halloween concert for employees. And I didn't get to see it, but I'm gonna go like rewatch that later tonight, and then I'll put it on my my Instagram. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, we'll link everything in the description for anybody listening.
Awesome.
So yeah, definitely go check him out. All right,
Yeah,
TK.
thank you so much. Thanks so much, and stay safe, guys. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
All right, you as well.